The laughter began before Alina even reached the ballroom doors. It was not cruel laughter. That somehow made it worse. A cluster of ladies stood beneath a crystal chandelier, speaking in lowered voices. Their smiles faded the moment they noticed her approaching. Too late, she had already heard her name. Poor thing. 3 years married and still follows him with her eyes. The Duke hardly notices. Alina Ashford, Duchess of Blackthorn, kept walking. Her spine remained straight. Her face remained composed. Only her hands trembled beneath her gloves. The grand ballroom shimmered with candlelight and music. Noblemen and ladies drifted across polished floors while servants moved silently among them. And standing near the far windows was her husband, the Duke of Blackthorn, tall, impeccably dressed, cold as winter. Sebastian Ashford spoke quietly with several gentlemen. He looked exactly as he always did, controlled, reserved, untouchable. Alina hated herself for searching for him the moment she entered every room. She hated herself even more when he failed to look back. 3 years of marriage, 3 years of hopping, 3 years of convincing herself that patience would eventually earn affection. Tonight felt no different until it did. Your Grace. A gentleman bowed before her, Lord Henry Whitmore, kind, pleasant, safe. May I have this dance? Relief softened her chest. Of course. As they joined the dancers, Alina allowed herself to smile. Lord Henry was easy company. He listened. He noticed things when she spoke. He actually looked at her, a shocking luxury. You seem troubled tonight, he said gently. Do I? A little. Alina laughed softly. Suppose I am not as skilled at hiding it as I imagined. Henry's expression warmed. You deserve better than loneliness. The words landed harder than he intended, because they were true. Alina's gaze drifted involuntarily across the room toward Sebastian. Her husband remained deep in conversation. Unaware or perhaps uninterested, Henry followed her glance. Understanding flickered across his face. That made her feel even worse. Pity was unbearable. The dance ended. She thanked him, then escaped to the terrace. Cold spring air greeted her. For several precious moments she stood alone, breathing, trying not to cry. The doors opened behind her. She expected Henry. Instead, she found Sebastian. The Duke stepped onto the terrace. His expression revealed nothing. Absent from the ballroom. She nearly laughed. After 3 years, this was how he opened conversations, observations, never feelings. Am I required to remain visible at all times? No, silence settled. Sebastian glanced toward the gardens. I saw you dancing. Something strange stirred inside her, hope, dangerous hope. Did you? Whitmore appears attentive. Alina stared. Was that criticism, approval, jealousy? She could not tell. With Sebastian she never could. Lord Henry is a friend. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Friends often become something else. Her heart stumbled. For one impossible second she thought he cared. Then he spoke again. You should be cautious. Society enjoys inventing stories. There it was, not concern for her feelings, concern for appearances, always appearances. Something inside Alina quietly cracked, not dramatically, not loudly, just enough. I understand. Sebastian nodded. Conversation concluded. As always, he turned toward the doors, then paused. You look well tonight. Compliment arrived so unexpectedly that it almost hurt. Before she could answer, he was gone, leaving her alone beneath the stars. Yet for the first time in 3 years, Alina did not feel hopeful. She felt tired. And that frightened her more than heartbreak ever had. Because hope kept people waiting, tired people eventually stopped. The following weeks brought rain, long silver curtains of rain that transformed Blackthorn Estate into a world of mist and quiet echoes. Alina discovered she preferred it. Rain discouraged visitors. It silenced expectations. Most importantly, it allowed her to avoid disappointment. She stopped seeking Sebastian during meals, stopped watching doors, stopped wondering whether he would join her in the library, stopped imagining conversations that never happened. At first, she barely noticed the change, then others noticed. You seem different. Younger sister Clara tilted her head during a visit. Different how? Happier. Answer startled Alina. Was she happier? Perhaps not, but she was calmer. There was a difference. That afternoon she spent hours sketching in the conservatory, a hobby she had abandoned after marriage. Sunlight filtered through glass, flowers bloomed around her. For the first time in years she lost track of time, a rare occurrence. Talented. The deep voice nearly made her drop her pencil. Sebastian stood nearby. She had not heard him enter. He examined the sketchbook, a collection of botanical illustrations. You never showed me these. Alina closed the book. You never asked. The words escaped before she could soften them. A flicker crossed his face. Something uncomfortable for once. He had no immediate response. Interesting. She returned to her drawing. Several moments passed. Then, you've spent less time in the house recently. Alina blinked. What? You ride often now? She stared. How did he know that? Sebastian rarely seemed aware of her movements, yet apparently he noticed more than she realized. Enjoy riding. Never used to. A strange conversation. Almost personal, almost. Suppose people change. His gaze lingered on her longer than usual. Then he departed, leaving behind a faint sense of confusion. Meanwhile, Sebastian rode back toward the main house with unfamiliar irritation. Something was changing. His wife seemed different, not unhappy, not angry, simply distant. The realization unsettled him, because Alina had always been there, a constant presence, warm, patient, reliable. Now she seemed focused elsewhere, and he disliked it. He told himself it was concern. Nothing more. Yet that explanation failed to satisfy. Several days later, society gathered at a country estate for a spring garden party. Alina arrived wearing pale blue. The color suited her. Everyone seemed determined to inform Sebastian of that fact. He heard it repeatedly, from gentlemen, from matrons, from young ladies, the Duchess this, the Duchess that. Sebastian found himself looking across crowded lawns, searching. Eventually he spotted her beneath flowering trees, laughing, with Lord Henry Whitmore, again. Something unpleasant tightened inside his chest. Henry leaned closer. Alina smiled. The sight should not have bothered him, yet it did, considerably. Sebastian spent the remainder of the afternoon in a worsening mood. The final blow arrived during tea. Your wife is remarkable. An older countess smiled. You must be proud, of course. Whitmore certainly appears captivated. Comment was harmless, probably. Yet Sebastian's teacup struck the saucer harder than intended. Across the table, Alina glanced toward him. Their eyes met. For one suspended moment, then she looked away, calmly, indifferently, as though his attention no longer mattered. For reasons he could not explain, that hurt. And for the first time, Sebastian wondered whether he had overlooked something precious until it began slipping away. Summer arrived with golden afternoons and endless social obligations. Alina found herself invited everywhere. Unexpectedly, she enjoyed it, not because she sought admiration, but because she had finally stopped measuring her worth through one man's approval. The freedom felt intoxicating. At a charity musicale in London, she sat beside artists, scholars, and writers, people who spoke passionately, people who listened, people who saw her not simply as a duchess, as a Alina. By evening's end, she was laughing, truly laughing. Across the room, Sebastian noticed, and hated how unfamiliar the sound felt. When had he last made her laugh, he could not remember. That realization lingered. Days later, it still lingered. The problem worsened when Lord Henry appeared increasingly often, always respectful, always proper, always present. At first Sebastian dismissed it. Then came jealousy, raw, unexpected, humiliating. One evening he entered a drawing room and found Alina reading. The sight instantly soothed him until she smiled, not at him, at a letter. Good news. The question escaped before he could stop it. Alina looked up, surprised. Lord Henry's sister has invited me to their estate. Sebastian's expression hardened. I see. Silence followed. Then, you dislike him. Observation was direct, dangerously direct. Barely know him. You always look displeased when he enters a room. Sebastian closed his book. I find him overly familiar. Alina laughed softly. That sounds suspiciously like jealousy. Room fell silent. Neither moved, neither spoke. At last Sebastian said quietly, would that amuse you? Something flickered in her eyes. Pain, old pain. Once, perhaps. Answer struck harder than she intended, because it carried truth. Once she would have cherished evidence that he cared. Now she simply felt tired. That night Sebastian stood alone in his study. Rain battered the windows. For years he had believed Alina needed him, needed his protection, his name, his position, his guidance. Now he faced an uncomfortable possibility. Perhaps he needed her more. The thought refused to leave. Several weeks later, everything became worse. A ball, music, candlelight, and a rumor. Someone suggested Lord Henry intended to propose. The gossip spread rapidly, ridiculously, yet society adored speculation. Sebastian heard the rumor shortly before midnight. His reaction was immediate, violent, not outwardly, never outwardly, but internally. The idea of another man claiming Alina's affection felt unbearable, impossible, and suddenly he understood, not completely, but enough. The problem was never Whitmore. The problem was that Sebastian Ashford loved his wife, and had been too blind to realize it. Unfortunately, realization arrived years late. And across the ballroom, Alina looked happier without him than she ever had beside him. The knowledge changed everything. And nothing. Sebastian loved Alina. The truth followed him relentlessly into meetings, into dinners, into sleepless nights. Yet knowing did not magically repair years of distance. He understood that painfully. One autumn afternoon he found Alina in the library. Rain tapped softly against windows. She sat near the fire, reading, peaceful, beautiful, his chest tight. "May I join you?" Her surprise was impossible to miss, of course. He sat opposite her, neither spoke for several minutes. Then Sebastian did something extraordinary. He asked about her book. The conversation lasted nearly half an hour, simple, ordinary. Yet when it ended, Alina felt strangely unsettled, because she had spent years longing for moments like this. Now they finally arrived, and she no longer trusted them. That frightened her. More than indifference ever had, the weeks continued. Sebastian became attentive, not dramatically, subtly. He remembered details, asked questions, walked beside her during gatherings, listened. Others noticed naturally. Society noticed everything. "Your husband seems devoted lately." A friend smiled knowingly. Alina forced a smile. Devoted. What a dangerous word. Meanwhile, Sebastian battled growing desperation. Every improvement seemed met with careful distance. Not coldness, distance. The difference mattered. Because Alina remained kind. Yet she no longer reached for him emotionally, no longer waited, no longer hoped. One evening they attended a winter house party. Snow covered the countryside. Candles glowed warmly against frozen darkness. Guests gathered for music and conversation. During dinner, a gentleman seated beside Alina became openly attentive, charming, intelligent, interested. Sebastian watched far longer than necessary. Jealousy burned. Later, he found Alina alone on a balcony. Snow drifted gently through moonlight. "You should be inside," she smiled faintly. "Miss this view?" His gaze rested on her, not the landscape, her. Alina. Something in his voice changed. She felt it immediately, dangerously intimate. For a moment neither moved. Then he said quietly, "Have I disappointed you beyond forgiveness?" The question stole her breath. Years of longing rose unexpectedly, painful, sharp. "I don't know." Honesty, nothing more, nothing less. Sebastian looked away, as though the answer wounded him. Perhaps it did. And for the first time, Alina realized she was no longer the only one hurting. Winter deepened, so did everything else. The distance between them remained. Yet beneath it flowed something stronger, awareness. One evening, a snowstorm trapped guests at Blackthorn Estate. Roads became impassable, carriages remained sheltered. Everyone settled in for an unexpected stay. The atmosphere turned intimate. Conversations stretched late into the night. Games were played. Music filled halls. Alina sat beside the fire reading. A familiar presence approached. Sebastian. He held a blanket. Without a word, he draped it over her shoulders. The gesture was small, almost insignificant, yet warmth rushed unexpectedly through her chest. Because care felt different when unspoken. Hours later, she slipped while descending an icy staircase outside. Strong hands caught her instantly. Sebastian, fear flashed across his face, raw and unguarded. Alina. Her name sounded different, as though losing her had terrified him. The realization lingered long after the moment passed. That night neither slept well. Different reasons. The following morning brought fresh tension. Lord Henry arrived unexpectedly after roads reopened. His attention toward Alina remained obvious, respectful, sincere, and increasingly painful for Sebastian to witness. Eventually Henry approached him directly. "May I speak frankly?" Sebastian nodded. Henry hesitated, then said quietly, "Your wife deserves happiness." Statement felt like a challenge. "She does." Henry studied him. "Then do not make the mistake of assuming she will wait forever." Words landed with devastating accuracy, because Sebastian knew they were true. That evening he stood outside Alina's sitting room for nearly 10 minutes, gathering courage, something he had never required in battlefields or political negotiations, yet required desperately now. Finally he knocked. When she invited him inside, he entered and closed the door. Alina. His voice was rough, unsteady. She immediately sensed something important. "What is it?" Several seconds passed. Then Sebastian said the words he should have spoken years earlier. "Love you." Silence, absolute silence. The confession hung between them, heavy, fragile, late, very late. Alina stared, her heart broke, not because she did not love him, because she still did, and that was the tragedy. After everything, she still did. Tears burned unexpectedly. Now the question shattered him, because he had no answer capable of undoing years, no explanation strong enough, no excuse worthy of forgiveness, only regret. And for the first time in his life, the Duke of Blackthorn realized love could arrive too late. After the confession, everything changed again. And yet nothing became simple. Alina avoided immediate answers. She needed space, needed honesty, needed herself. For years she had built her world around Sebastian. Now she finally possessed a world of her own. She refused to lose it, even for love, especially for love. Weeks passed. Sebastian remained patient, painfully patient. He courted his own wife, walks, conversations. Letters left beside breakfast plates, books selected because she might enjoy them, small kindnesses, consistent kindnesses, no grand gestures, just effort, daily effort. Alina noticed all of it. Unfortunately, noticing made resistance harder. One rainy afternoon they became stranded in a carriage while returning from town. Rain hammered the roof. The countryside disappeared behind gray curtains. For nearly an hour they sat together alone. No escape, no distractions, only truth. I was afraid. Sebastian stared at the window. Of what? Loving someone. Admission surprised even him. Alina listened quietly. My parents destroyed each other. Every affection became a weapon. His voice remained low, controlled, yet vulnerability threaded through every word. I thought distance would protect us both. Alina's chest tightened. And did it? No, a broken laugh escaped him. No, it destroyed us instead. Honesty hurt. Because she understood it at last. For years she had mistaken indifference for absence of feeling. Now she saw fear. Fear had cost them both dearly. The carriage continued through rain, neither spoke. Yet something shifted, something healed, not completely, but enough. When they returned home, Alina found herself watching him differently, not as the man who had hurt her, not only that, as the man trying desperately to become better. And that was far more dangerous, because hope began returning slowly, carefully. Against her better judgment, spring returned. With it came change. Real change, not promises, not intentions, change. Sebastian no longer loved her in silence. He showed it, consistently, publicly, privately. He listened, supported, encouraged. When Alina organized a charitable education project, he funded it without attempting control. When she spoke, he listened. When she succeeded, he celebrated her. Not because she was his wife, because she was Alina. For the first time, she felt truly seen. The transformation did not go unnoticed. Neither did Sebastian's devotion. Society gossiped endlessly, ironically. The same people who once pitied Alina now envied her. Yet the most important change occurred privately, inside her heart. One evening she stood in the gardens watching sunset paint the sky gold. Sebastian approached quietly, neither rushed to speak. Comfortable silence settled between them, a rare gift. Eventually he said, "I would understand if you never trusted me completely again." Statement was sincere, painfully sincere. Alina looked at him, really looked at the man who had changed, the man who regretted, the man who stayed day after day, without demanding forgiveness, without demanding reward, simply because he loved her. And suddenly she understood something. Trust was not built through perfect beginnings. It was built through repeated choices. He had been choosing her for months, every day. "I do trust you." His breath caught. Alina smiled softly. "Because of who you were." She stepped closer. "But because of who you are becoming." Emotion flashed openly across his face. No masks, no walls, just relief, just love. And for the first time, Sebastian allowed himself to believe she might truly come back to him. Summer arrived beneath endless blue skies. The estate gardens bloomed brilliantly. Life felt lighter, warmer, whole. One afternoon, Blackthorn hosted a grand celebration. Music drifted across lawns. Guests laughed beneath elegant tents. Children played among flowers. The atmosphere shimmered with happiness. Alina moved gracefully through the gathering, confident, self-assured, radiant, not because someone finally loved her, because she had learned to love herself first. That difference mattered. Across the garden, Sebastian watched her, still captivated, perhaps more than ever. Eventually she found him standing beneath an old oak tree, the same place where years earlier she had once cried alone after a disappointing evening. How strange life could be. Starring. His smile appeared immediately. "I always am," she laughed. The sound remained his favorite thing in the world. For a moment, they simply stood together. Watching guests, watching sunlight filter through leaves, watching a future neither had expected. Then Sebastian reached into his pocket. Alina frowned. "What is that?" "A letter." "A letter. I wrote it years ago." Her curiosity deepened. "Years ago, I loved you already." Confession stunned her. "What?" Sebastian nodded. "I simply never gave it to you." Emotion tightened her throat. Slowly she unfolded the paper. The handwriting was unmistakably his, reserved, careful, yet every line carried affection, admiration, love. Of that had existed long before he found the courage to speak. Tears blurred her vision. "You fool." His laugh was soft. I know. Alina looked up. The years of loneliness, the waiting, the heartbreak, the growth, the healing, all of it seemed to gather inside that single moment. Then she stepped forward and placed her hand in his, not because she needed him, not because she feared being alone, not because she sought approval, but because she chose him freely, completely. Love you too. Words were quiet, yet they changed everything. Emotion filled Sebastian's eyes. For once he made no attempt to hide it. The powerful Duke of Blackthorn, the man feared in Parliament, the man respected across the country, looked utterly undone by his wife, the woman he nearly lost, the woman who taught him that love could not survive on assumption. It required presence, honesty, courage, and choice. He lifted her hand carefully, holding it as though it were precious. Because it was. Beyond them, music continued. Guests laughed. Summer sunlight bathed the gardens. Life moved forward. Yet for Alina and Sebastian, the world felt wonderfully still. Years ago, he believed she needed him to survive. He had been wrong. She flourished the moment she stopped seeking his approval. And strangely, that was the very thing that saved them both. Because only when Alina discovered her own strength did Sebastian learn how deeply he loved her. And only when Sebastian learned to love openly did Alina finally feel free enough to return that love. Together they stood beneath the summer sky. No longer bound by expectation, no longer separated by silence, no longer waiting. At last, they were simply two people who had found their way back to one another. And as the golden evening settled across Blackthorn Estate, warmth filled every corner of the life they would share, not perfect, not effortless, but real. And sometimes, real love was the most beautiful ending of all.